Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about moving files in the Power Platform. And we're not going to just give you a fish, we're going to teach you how to fish. We're going to go over some definitions, MIME types, content bytes, Base64, why do we use Base64, Power Automate, Power Apps. Let's get into it and let's talk about all those different reasons and how we're going to use that in today's video. Now I want to go over some of these words that you might hear more and more often. One is MIME. I call it MIME type, and that's literally just your file type. So that's the image/PNG, application/PDF, text/plain. Another place that you may see this is when you do a REST call, application/JSON. And this was used in emails way back, but now it's become so useful. People use it for all kinds of things. And that is just your file type. Now, another thing is Base64. Base64 is used all over the Power Platform, especially for Power Automate. And that is a way to convert a file content to a string of characters. And it makes it safe for JSON. And when I say safe for JSON, that just means it makes it work in JSON. Then you have things like content bytes. Inside Power Platform, you need content bytes. And this is just a way to label your Base64 content. In every file, there is the name of the file and then the content bytes. So you have the name, content bytes with the Base64 format there. And that's just how Power Platform understands the content of the actual file. Now, I have a PNG file here in a document library in SharePoint. So let's check out this PNG file. And it's very important. It's very, very important. And that is, I will be speaking in Seattle between June 23rd and 27th at the Techcon, Datacon, PowerCon conference. So if you can attend, you can always use my name, use the code AndrewHess. You could save $100 on the admission fee for the conference. So use my name, save $100. Here we are, and I really hope to see as many people as I can. Daniel, Christian, and I, we're gonna have two different sessions. The first one on building intelligent solutions in the Power Platform, and the second one on using AI models for modern solutions in the Power Platform. This is like using the AI builder with Power Apps, Power Automate. Can't wait to get into it. Can't wait to see you in Seattle this year, 2025, in June. I want to keep this as simple as possible because we really want to focus on how to use Power Automate with this. So I'm going to go up here to the waffle. I call this the waffle and Power Automate. And I have a ton of Power Automates in here, but today we're going to create a new one. It's going to be an instant cloud flow just because I want to make this super simple. What we're going to do is when I press a button, we are going to move a file. We're going to manually trigger a flow. So that's our trigger. We're just going to click a button and we're going to run this. And then once we click that button, we're going to get the file. Now, when we go to SharePoint, there's a few different actions that you can look in. So we look at SharePoint, click on See More. You have Create File. Then there's Get File Properties, and then Get Files. That's multiple files. There's also Get File Content, which is very important. Get File Content using Path. So those are the ones that we're going to focus on today. There's even more, get file metadata, get metadata during path, but we're going to focus on these four. And then there's even get attachment content, and I believe there is add attachment. So there's even add attachment if we were doing a list. But today we're going to go from, or right now, we're going to go from library to library. So I have one library, my out-of-the-box document library, and then I have a secondary library, which is empty. And I want to take this file and move it to the secondary library. So what I'm going to do is, first, I'm going to actually grab the file properties. I'm going to grab the file properties. I'm going to hard code in my URL. So right here, test homepage. The library name is my out-of-the-box library name. So it is called Documents. And it's asking for the ID. I really want you to see how all the inner workings of this works. So when we go to the library and we do add column and we click show or hide column here, you can see there is an ID field. And this ID may not be one, But for me right now, the ID is 1. So I'm going to hard code this in there right now. These are learning blocks. Let's just kind of learn through. This is probably not the best way to do it. But right now, I'm going to grab ID 1. I'm going to grab my first file in my document library. I'm going to get the file properties. Let's just run this. Actually, let's just run this and check this out. Because there's a specific piece that's missing when we get file properties. So test, manual run, test. Let's run the flow. Now, when we get file properties and we come down here and we do show raw outputs, a status code of 200 is successful. Click show raw outputs, and then all the way down here where we get our body, down in here. Now, what's important is we have the ID right here. That's very important. That shows the ID. We have modified. That's very important. And then we can see editor. We can see who edited the file. And then we can see my display name, my job title, department, my image of my image. We have my email in there, the claims, all this great data. So we have all this great data in there. You can see that we have created, email, picture, and down in here, is a folder? No, a thumbnail. So these are the different size thumbnails in SharePoint. There's large, medium, and small. All that's very important information. And so if we keep coming down in here, we can even see a little bit more, which is even more important. Right down here, file name with extension. Do you see that? File name with extension. And we also have is checked out, content type, all this important data in there. And these are things that Power Automate makes it easy for us to pull out, right? Power Automate does a lot of the work for us. And so what is this? This is JSON. In between the brackets, this is just some JSON that we can kind of look at, and we can see all this information, and we're just doing get file properties. But what's missing is the actual content. And so when you think about this, how does Power Automate pass the content? It's not just going to pick up the picture and move it. And how does the computer think about moving it? How does a computer know that an image is an image? And so what it does normally is it converts it to text. And there's different types of text that it can convert to. And in Power Automate, most of the time, it wants a Base64 format. And in here, if we do get file content, I'm going to do using path. I like to do using path. And what we're going to do is we're going to select the specific path and the file. We're hard coding everything in here this time. And it's in shared documents. And it is my file right here. Now, we're going to actually grab the content too. So now let's do save, test, and run again. And this time, it's going to grab the actual content. And you have to think like you're a computer. How does a computer know? How does it move that picture? It doesn't just take a picture, right? And then move it as a picture. No, it takes that picture, converts it into text. And all that text ends up being what the picture is actually made out of. So it was successful. Once again, most likely it is a status code of 200. But let's look at, and notice it says no outputs. And the reason is because the outputs is so long that Power Automate's like, I'm not even going to share that right now. But if we click on show raw outputs, it's going to load this huge string. And this string is called Base64 Format. If we come down here and we scroll all the way down, so all the way down here, you can see we have this huge long string. I mean, it's really long. This string is super long. Let's try and pull it into a text. So I'm going to paste it in there. And because this string is so large, it's going to take a little bit. But you can see this string here. And let's zoom in a little bit more. So take a look at this area right here. You can see that right here we have body, right? You can see body. And then content type, image PNG. That's very important. That's going to be our MIME type. And then content. So this content right here is actually this Base64 format. And this is what makes our image. So that giant image in there is all made up with the Base64 format. And you can see what it's going to do is every 64 characters, most likely it's going to add a slash. So about every 64 characters, it's going to add a slash in there, unless there's some kind of code that it doesn't understand. Maybe this is a double quote, but about every 64, you're going to see a slash, and then you're going to see some text. So once again, a slash and then some text, a slash and then some text. This is that Base64 format. Now you may be asking, why is it doing this Base64 format? And it's a huge, if you look at this, it is a huge, huge file of so many characters and strings. And all of these characters make up your image. All of these characters, I don't know how many there are. We're not going to count them because I don't want to bog down my computer. But all these characters make up our image. And why does Power Automate do this? The reason Power Automate converts to a Base64 format is because it calls it what is a safe format, or a format that is acceptable in JSON. That's what you may hear, that this format is safe, and that means that the Base64 format works with JSON, which is what Power Automate is going to use. It's a long, long string, and you notice that Power Automate doesn't even show us, right? Power Automate's like, that's too long. That was actually, opening that in Notepad was actually bogging down my computer a little bit. And my computer's very fast. So that's another thing, is this is a very long string, and that's what is converting the file into a Base64 format. It takes up all those characters, and that's what makes up our image. Now, it's not always just images. It could be a file type of PDF. It could be a Word document. So now let's go to SharePoint. And let's create a file. So check in file, create a file in our secondary library. So I'm going to go to my secondary library, testing homepage. The folder path is my secondary library. So if we go to my SharePoint site, I have a secondary library here. This is where we're going to move our image. So we're going to that secondary library. Now the file name, we can name this anything we want in our new document library. Sometimes it's important, if you don't want to overwrite the file, to add the date. So let's get today's date. Current time, let's see, I think we do current time, because it's important to have that unique name. So when we create the file, it's important to maybe add the current time. And then when the current time, we also then add the file name. So now we're going to scroll down in here, and we're going to grab the see more, the file name with extension. It's important to add the extension. Let me not add it at first. Let's just do the name without the extension. So the name, and then we can pass the file content, which is our Base64 content. And let's give it a test now. Now what's going to happen, and this is a question that a lot of people get. They say, oh, my file is not showing up right. It's because you're forgetting that the type of the file. So let's run it again. We're grabbing the file content type. We're grabbing the current time. We're adding that to the file name. We created the file. Everything was successful. Now you can see we have the time in here. It makes a unique character. But look at the image. It doesn't know how to open it. Like SharePoint's like, hey, I don't know what type of image this is. So now let's create the file, but with extension. So this time, file name with extension. And let's try again. Test, manual, run flow again with the extension. All right, so this time we're creating the file. It's taking a little bit longer. It's running. Let's give a refresh to SharePoint. Now you notice now it has a picture icon. And if we open it up, we can see that the image was successfully moved from one library to the second, and the picture actually works. Right? So this one, there was an error. It's like, I don't know what the extension is. I don't know what that MIME type is. I don't know what file type that is. But this time it worked. And if you really want to get technical, let's take out this action here of current time. So we're going to remove this action. And instead of saying grabbing the time here, let's actually write an FX formula. And that simple FX formula is just format date time, UTC now, and then we give our date a structure. And maybe we want to do an underscore here. We want to keep everything without spaces. I hate spaces. So our time is now going to be in there. We added an underscore and then another underscore here in between the file extension. Let's save, test, run again. So test, manual run it again, run flow, let it run. It's going to grab that file content type. It's in Base64, which is what we want. It's going to create the file, refresh. And you notice now it looks a little bit better, 2503, 23, 16. And then the underscores in here, we click on it, it opens up our file. Now what's great is we can run it again and it's not going to overwrite. And let's say we ran it again, so we could test, do another manual. If you do automatic, it probably will grab that same time, but we can grab the time again and let it run again. And the good thing is it's not going to overwrite. So if we click refresh, we then have another one, a few seconds. Oh, this one was a minute ago. This one was a few seconds ago. All the same image. Everything's looking good in the document library. Now it's the exact same thing for a SharePoint list. Now let's say we had a SharePoint list and we want an attachment. So let's just kind of make sure we can view the attachment column. So add column, show hide columns. Every list comes with an out-of-the-box field called attachments. So this comes with a list. And now in our list, we just want a title or an attachment. So now instead of doing the file, which we'll leave that in there, we'll keep creating the files. Now let's create a list item. So list item, create item. So we are going to create an item in SharePoint right here. So this time we're going to grab our SharePoint site again, the list name, Andrew's list, and we have a title column here. So we'll just say, once again, we could grab that date time format. Let's turn this into a compose statement or a variable. Compose statement runs a little bit faster. Rename it compose file name. So now where we created the file, this right here, we're going to say format date time. Let's grab that equation again. Do an FX formula, format date time, okay, underscore, file name with extension. And now we've created that like a variable or a compose statement that's going to hold that value for us. So now instead of that here, we can use the lightning bolt and do the outputs of our compose statement. So if you hover over, you'll see, and if I zoom in there, you'll see it says outputs, compose underscore file name. That's important. Hovering over things is very useful in Power Automate as you get more and more into it. So now we're creating that file. Now let's do a SharePoint list item. So create item in SharePoint this time. We're going to create an item in our SharePoint list. So test homepage, Andrew's list. Now what we're going to do is we're going to show all. We see we have title. So let's just put in our compose statement file name. That'll be the name of our list item. And the next problem is, well, how do we add an attachment? Well, attachment is an out-of-the-box functionality of all SharePoint lists. But in order to add an attachment, it's a new action. So attachment, add attachment, and we're going to choose the same site. So test homepage, the same list, but this time our ID is going to come from this action right here. So our create item action is what is going to be our ID. So you see ID from, we created the item. Now that we created the item in SharePoint, now grab that ID. And now let's add the actual attachment. So file name, we're going to use that compose file name. File content is going to be the content from the get file content using path. And let's give it another test. Test, manual, test, run, done. Now it's running. It's getting the file properties, getting the file content, Base64, composing. Then it's going to create the file. Then it's going to create a SharePoint list item, and then the attachment. So let's give it a refresh in the list. And you can see here we have our list item. And right here is the attachment. And you see it's .png. So we can click on it, open it. We have our image. I'm zoomed in a lot here. But there we go. There's our image. So it is working. It's working in the browser. It's now added as an attachment to our list. It also, in our library, we also created one, not a minute ago. Maybe it was a minute ago. A minute ago, we created that file right there. So once again, we added it to a library. We added it to a list. It's all kind of the same thing. You just need to make sure that it's in a Base64 format. That's what's important. All right. So we did Power Automate. We created a file. We moved a file. We also created an attachment, which is very important to use the attachment. Let's do Power Apps now. Let's go to Power Apps. Power Apps. And there's some new functionality that Microsoft is releasing. It's really nice to see. So when we click Create and we do Start with Blank Canvas, now we have this new option. Of course, it looks beautiful, right? So we have responsive, which is like a super shortcut for me because always, every time I create I had to do this, I had to do this. Now we have this Start with a Blank Canvas. Now my tenant is in preview features, so if you don't see this, it's coming to a tenant near you, right? All right, it's coming to a tenant near you. And what I love to do right now is responsive. I don't need tablet size. I don't need photo size. Responsive. We have this nice responsive Power App. Now let's add a media uploader. And I'm just going to do image right now, right? So add picture type. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do add picture. And I'm just going to kind of make sure, this all kind of fits in there. All right, so I added my image in there. I just kind of resized it so it looked a little better. But now I added the picture. I click change picture. We have our image in there. Now I want to upload it to SharePoint. And to do that, I'm going to start from a blank Power Automate just to show you each of these little parts. I just want to start from a blank Power Automate. Let's go back and My Flows, and let's create a new flow. Once again, Instant Cloud Flow. And this one is going to be when Power Apps calls a flow v2. And we'll say from file from Power Apps. Click Create. Now I'm going to do this wrong at first on purpose. If you want to skip ahead, go ahead and skip ahead. I'll put a chapter in where we do it correctly. Okay, so there's a couple things that we want in our flow. One, we want the file name. So file name. We want the file name. And then there's another thing we want, right? So just like before, file name, content. So we want that content also. So content. So we can actually save right here. Can we save? Let's see. Can we save? We need at least one action. Let's just compose. Just to show how all of this works. Compose, put the file name in the compose, save. File from Power Apps. It has two variables that we manually created, file name and content. Let's go back to Power Apps. And now I'm going to go over here to the dots, like right up above my head here. We're going to go to Power Automate, not create flow. This time I'm going to add flow. There's multiple ways to do it. This is just how I'm doing this today. Let me move me. And we are going to run the flow file from Power Apps. File from Power Apps. This pulls the flow into our Power App so it can run. Now I'm going to add a button. And this button is going to run our flow. And we'll just make it take up all the space, right? Like just on this button, what it's going to do is it's going to run our Power Automate flow. And to do that, type in the name of your Power Automate flow. That's why it's important to name it something that you like. So file, Now you notice in the IntelliSense is FileFromPowerApps.Run and FileFromPowerApps. We want the .run version. And you notice it says text_1. So these are our actual fields. And if you see right here, file name, look underneath it, file name. So we're going to say test.png. Let's just make it simple right now. And then now the content. And what is the content? Let's look at our file here. So uploaded image 1. You see this in the tree? In the tree over there? In the tree over there. Uploaded image 1. That's what we want. Uploaded image 1. Someone asked me this question. Where did I get that from? Sometimes I rename this instead of uploaded image 1. And then you do dot image, end it. And now we have our file name and our content. Let's click save. Test file Power App. Okay, let's save this Power App. I'm going to go to Power Automate and let's go ahead, but let's just add a SharePoint file content. So SharePoint, add a file. Once again, we're doing the same thing. Create file, site address. We're going to hard code it in. Test homepage. The path is going to be our secondary library. The file name is going to be file name right here. And I'm not even going to use this compose. So this compose is not, that was just before for a test. Create file. File content is content. Save. So I've saved. Now we can't really do a test manually here. It's going to ask for us to write in the file name and the content, but we don't have that. But what we can do is go back to our Power App, click play, and click run Power Automate Flow. I believe it's going to break. Let's find out. So let's go back. Based on my license, right here, it ran 6 seconds ago. It was successful. That's nice. Let's go ahead and take a look at SharePoint. So test.png. And it looks like it did not work. So let's take a look. It almost worked. It knew that it was a PNG. It got the file type right? But it doesn't, there's no content in there. There's no content. Or the content is not in a format that Power Automate is going to accept. So let's take a look at the flow. Let's take a look at the outputs and look at the body. So you see, it says, so you see you have text, that's our test.png, that's our file name. Text_1 is actually AppRes, Blob Manager, etc., etc. It's not a Base64 format. It's not going to accept it. So we need to make sure that when we pass this through JSON, that it's in a Base64 format, or Power Automate is not going to accept that file type. All right, so that didn't work, but it was important to see how that didn't work. So let's go to Power Automate real quick. So instead of doing the Power Automate trigger like that, one thing is once you kind of start doing this, it won't let you just delete things. So you have to actually delete the whole trigger. And let's try from Power Apps V2. Let's recreate the trigger. So we're going to have the file name. And then the next one is going to be the actual file. That's what we want. We want file content. And I'll probably remove the space in there. So we have name, file content. It's important to do the input as file content, not just a text file. Okay, I'm going to hit, let's see, make sure everything's in there. We're missing file name. So we'll just say file name and file content in there. Okay, we'll hit save. And we're still not making this work perfect yet, but let's just go to Power Apps. Let's go to Power Apps. And one thing you need to do when you start doing this is you have to go to Power Automate and you have to hit refresh. That's very important to hit the refresh button because Power Apps may not realize there was that big of a change. Okay. So now in our button, once again, we're going to do File from PowerApps Run. That's the name of our flow. Run. It's going to be test test.png, and we can throw, and notice that right there. Notice that it's looking for the file. Now, there's some ways where I have seen it where you don't need this file part, but the way that I've been doing it and currently where I'm at, you do need the file. In the brackets, it's looking for that. I have seen it before where it doesn't. Try both. This is one of the comments I saw before, that it worked as soon as they got rid of the file part. So the file it contains a couple things. First is the name. First thing, and we got to put it in brackets for JSON or a record. The name is going to be test.png. Every file needs a name, and so that's the name of our file. And then what it's looking for is the content bytes. Let's just try content. I don't think it's going to work. I just want to try content and see what happens. And so the content is actually the uploaded image dot image. Now, I don't think it's going to work. And it's actually good. What's happening is it says there's an error. And it says that, hey, in your formula, it's missing a column called file.contentBytes. That's very important that this is called contentBytes. And as soon as you call your contentBytes, it then understands and fixes it. So I like how, let's try changing this to title. It breaks. And once again, it's going to say, hey, you're missing file.name. So name is very important. When you do a file, it's looking for two parts. The name of the file is looking for contentBytes. So both of those are very important parts of our equation. So we're going to have our file. We're going to give it a name that we want. Then the metadata of the file has a name, and then it has the contentBytes. All right, so let's give it another try, and let's run our flow again. And this time, when we go back and we look at our flow run, it looks like it was successful. We have the information in there, the outputs, the file contentBytes. Let's check out SharePoint. So we did rename it test.png. It is overwriting it. So a few seconds ago, it ran again. Click on it, open it up. Boom, our image is there. Our image is there. It's working. That's what we want. So all of this is very, very important. Let's kind of take a look at some other things. Let's look at, let's type in file. So the same thing is going to work for OneDrive, right? So OneDrive for business, the same thing is going to work if we try to create a file. It's looking for the folder path, the file name. Remember, we needed file.name, and then the file content. This is our content bytes. So that's our contentBytes. Now, when you do Power Automate, and let's say you get really, really good at this, you just always got to remember is that it wants it in this Base64 format. That's how Power Automate is going to be able to move the file around, is through that Base64 text value. You can't just take a file picture and move a file picture. You're taking an image, converting it to a Base64 format, and then you're taking that Base64 format, putting it in JSON, and then taking that and then writing to your end code. So there's all kinds of neat little things we can do there. And that's how you move a image. Now, same thing with a PDF, etc. But what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to split up this video. I had more of it, but the video is getting pretty long. I'm going to do tips and tricks. We're going to do emails. We'll do an attachment to an email. We'll write in the body of an email without actually saving the file anywhere. We will write Base64, put it in HTML, and put it in the body of an email. And I'm going to save all that for next week. So stay tuned. Come visit me in Seattle, and I will see you next week. Thank you.